can't blame it on the hirer.
Actually, Brian, I think it'd be worth you taking the time to read the guidance, because it's quite clear that hirers are responsible for making sure their own activities are COVID secure as well.
I fully understand. I fully understand that as and when they're in the premises, people signing in records and observing whatever they're doing, sterilising, all the rest of it. But what I'm saying is the cleanliness of the premises between hires. That surely, to be absolutely, it's got to rest with the responsible body, which is the council.
The guidance does say you do have two options. One is to do it yourself, and one is to pass that obligation on to the hirer. The unfortunate fact is that if the parish council undertook the cleaning in between each and every booking, we'd be operating at a significant loss. We'll be spending more money on cleaning than we would be taking in the booking.
So, I mean, you know, I raised the point, but obviously, Chairman, it's a risk that you've got to evaluate, I would suggest.
I can understand what Brian's point is, which is that if we are allowing the premises to be used by different organisations, what guarantee can we give to the next one along that it has been properly cleaned? I think it probably does need some more thought, but I don't think we're going to resolve it tonight. Howard, you were trying to come in, I think.
1 or 2 points. Going back to Roger's comment about opening the office, I agree with Roger. We should have a physical presence. Add the rider that as long as staff are happy with that, and clearly Roger would have to talk to the staff. I think it could be that we only have one member of staff in there at a time. And I think any notice on that would be better on the door rather than the railings, because if we have a letter on the railings, instructions of when we're open and whatnot, there's always somebody might look and say they're closed at the moment, let's have a bit of vandalism. So I think it'd be better to put it on the door. With regard to the hall, I think that we've got to be aware of exactly what people are doing in their responsibility, the hirers, to make sure everything is safe, because I don't think we want to get into a situation where we're pointing to a government document to say, not us, mate. So I think morally we have some sort of responsibility, and I think it's highly likely that the people who are hiring in some cases will not have even thought of these issues. So I think, in spite of what the rules say, I think we've got to have some sort of overview on that.
I think we probably need to be moving on from this item, but what I've taken so far is when Sarah and Lizzie are back from leave, we should be aiming to open the office and making it clear publicly when it's opened, not probably the previous hours. And on opening the hall and pavilion, we do need to do quite a bit more work before we'll be able to actually open them, because we do need to get that right. Although, you know, it's interesting that the guidance does appear to conflict with what Brian is saying. I don't think we can take it further tonight unless anyone has any final comments they want to make.
Nick, can I just come in on one thing which occurs to me that I mean, I'm sort of mindful on the cleaning, but the other thing I think we definitely should do is actually work out what the new capacity of each of the halls is, because that's something which A, we need to be certain of, and B, I think we need to be able to advise hirers of, to say, you know, that, you know, you can no longer fit 80 people in the hall. You might only be able to fit 30 people in the hall, because I'm thinking otherwise of events like the luncheon club, for example, where there's just no way at the moment that they could have their full number of people in there safely.
I think you just proved the point that we can't rush into it, but in fact it might be attractive in terms of income. Any other comments on this one? So Sarah, when we can, you and I can perhaps review what people have, the comments people have made, and we'll have a plan. May we then move on to item 6, where Sarah has done a lot of work, hopefully, to make this a COVID-friendly meeting, and that we aren't going to spend as much time on each item as perhaps we did when we were all meeting face to face. And I did ask if everyone had a chance to read the papers, so I'm going to assume you have all read Sarah's summaries and go through heading by heading, pavilion, village hall, granting hut, etc. Just picking up concerns or issues that people want to raise. So if we start on pavilion, I'm just thinking, personally, I feel because others were leading long before I joined the council, I need to go and have a site visit to understand all the issues. But Sarah, what do you think are the main things that we need to be doing in terms of pavilion? I see that we, for example, we've not yet got a date from Hampshire County Council. Is there something that we need to do to push them on that? Obviously, one of the things we need to look at when I do the site visit is the issue of security lighting is a further concern. Anything that you think, anything else we should discuss?
Signage is on the agenda later in the meeting. Pavilion screening is indeed an ongoing issue, but the only reason I haven't picked anything else out because everything is moving. There's nothing we can do on the issue tonight in particular, other than decide on the signage. Everything else is ongoing, and will be taken forward as soon as it can, really.
And it's interesting that Hampshire County Council were wishing to rush to do things on the on Station Road in the centre of the village, but are not exactly rushing on this. I'm just wondering if we could give them a bit of a push. And does anyone have any thoughts about how we might do that?
I have mentioned this to the person that's actually implementing the scheme when I was talking to them about highways issues outside the school. And it is just that Hampshire are not using, so because this is an actual bit of building work rather than just putting out cones, they just are clearing through a backlog of work that they have to do on their own schemes at the moment. He has assured me that we are top of the list when it comes to implementing community schemes. So I think it's just a case of us keeping pushing. And if we haven't made any progress by the time the committee next meets, we may want to talk about involving Russell as our county councillor. But I'm loath to push too hard because I'm busy trying to build relationships with the officers. So I don't want to give them too much of a nudge, because I think they are trying to work it through it.
Thanks,
I
Andy.
agree. I am in regular contact, and I've been assured that we are top of the priority list. So I don't really think there's anything more to be done. I think we just have to be a little bit patient. These things take time, as we all know. But I will remain in regular contact just to make sure it does move as quickly as it can. But I don't think there's anything more to do right now.
Does anyone else have points to make about the pavilion? Okay, we'll move on. Just on the marketing, I think that's something, Sarah, I'd like to come back to you on when we can actually say it is open and available, but not for now.
Well, interestingly, we have had a few inquiries from new users because the pavilion hall is much larger than their current hall, and they're very aware that they need a greater space to continue their existing activity. So we are actually attracting some new users. We've had, I think, 3 or 4 inquiries. So that's quite positive.
Okay, shall we move on then? Village Hall, we've got an item on maintenance, item 7. Is there anything that anyone wants to raise about that? Groundsman's Hut, we'll deal with at item 10. Office improvements. Anyone want to raise any points on that?
No.
I would say that we may not spend that budget this year, because for us officers, clearing the office and working out exactly what it is we need in the office comes before looking at new storage and so on. And there's so much old stuff in the office that it takes a long time to work through it, because we don't have the time to devote to it. So we're much more focused on weeding and getting rid of old things we don't need. And then we can look at what it is we do need and how we can rearrange the office and so on. So I'm not sure we'll even spend that this year, but it might be something that we need to look at again next year.
Well, we've got other things we do want to spend more on, so that might be a virtue. Newman Collard Recreation Ground. I think we should just thank Sarah for the work she's done to finally bring Southern Water to, well, not a conclusion, but near to the work is about to happen. The path in need of repair is one of the things I'd like to have a look at when I become slightly more expert. Any points that people want to raise about this?
I was wondering if Sarah could give a bit more information on the track rider claim, just kind of what the process was for how it was claimed and how it was concluded, because I'd just be interested.
So our insurers accepted that Liss Parish Council had done everything that we were supposed to do. So they refused the claim, and I think there was a 4-month period where further representations could be made, and no further representations were made. So they closed the case. So it's formally closed. So it goes to show that our inspection regime works.
Any other comments?
Just a query, Nick, actually. Hopefully Sarah knows the answer to, but last week there were 3 compound vans over on the playground who appeared to be checking the wooden, the sort of, I'm not going to say adult swings, the swings near Newman Collard. Do we know what was it? Just routine maintenance, or what was there a problem?
I'd sent them our inspection reports because a few things have been highlighted that fall within the warranty period. And so they've undertaken about 3 days work filling in any splits and any other bits and pieces that needed doing. So they've given it a thorough overhaul based on our inspection reports, because they do still have an obligation towards us, because it's only early days, we're still in the warranty period.
Okay, great. As I said, it's just I saw them now and I thought, oh, wonder what they.
Any other comments? Okay.
Howard's trying to speak.
Oh, Howard. Hello.
Hello. The track rider claim, I heard what happened, but I don't know what happened originally, what the claim was. Maybe I've missed out on something. So could somebody please explain what the claim and the grounds were?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mention that. A child fell, and I think they either broke their arm or their elbow or their wrist. I can't remember now. It was some time ago. But Compan changed the surfacing to make it to provide a softer landing. So yeah.
Okay, the track rider, that's the thing that you hang on and it's on a cable. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
On by the tennis court.
So does it have any implications for how it operates in future?
I didn't catch that, Nick.
Well, given that there was this incident, which we haven't been held liable for, which is good, but does it have implications for how that particular bit of equipment is operated in future?
It doesn't. We did go back to Compan, who installed the track rider, and they offered to change the surfacing for us. at no cost to LPC. So that has been done. So I don't have any concerns about its future operation, no.
Okay, any other comments on that before we go on? Okay, so we come to the two recreation grounds. Anything that you need to add, Sarah?
Nothing on West Liss other than that we accept it's in a really poor, it's nothing unsafe, but we accept it's in a poor state. I mean, there's very little left, but we're awaiting the outcome of our seal bid, which will be known in the autumn. So that's West Liss. So we don't intend to undertake any, or I wouldn't propose one to take any minor improvements because the whole thing needs replacing.
Again, I'll have a look at that when I find out about these things.
And Liss Forest, there's an item on the agenda.
Yeah. Any comments from members? Okay. Riverside Walk. Benches being vandalised and bollards being mowed down. It's a rather sad story, isn't it? But is there anything we need to discuss?
No, it's unfortunate that we do have vandalism at the picnic area on a semi-regular basis, but the groundsman always repairs it, and I think that's the important thing to do to keep it in good shape. But it's just unfortunate that sometimes it does happen down there because it's quite discreet, not very overlooked. And the bollard being mowed down was a one-off incident. There was, I think it was a joyriding incident. But that bollard is to be replaced by EHDC shortly. They've been promising me that for a while, but hopefully soon.
Any comments from members? Okay, let's move on to allotments.
I think Howard was trying to speak again, but his mic's off. You need to there you go.
Right, can you hear me now? Okay. I've walked past there several times in the last 3 or 4 months, and it's not unusual to see half a dozen teenagers, I suppose, sitting round the table there and drinking, I know not what, but they seem to have been behaving responsibly, apart from the fact they were really ignoring the notices to say, don't use this equipment. So I think it's a hidden away. They thought they wouldn't be seen there.
Sounds right to me. I mean, the sort of thing they do.
Yeah.
Can we move on to allotments? There's a lot of potential development under that item, which obviously has been held up by COVID. I'm particularly interested in the community allotment idea. And I do recall, I think Brian mentioning to me that there was someone who might have been part of the shed community who had some ideas about community allotments. Brian, do you recall that? Can you enlighten us?
Yes, the suggestion, Chairman, came from Jeff Davis, whom some of you will recall is the previous Parish Council tree warden. Jeff isn't actually a member of Liss Men's Shed. I'm not quite sure what prompted him to come up with it, but it's something he fed to the Men's Shed. The Men's Shed may like to perhaps consider, but the Men's Shed have got enough other things on hand at the moment without giving any thought to community allotments, I'm afraid. But I can put you in touch with Jeff Davis if you like.
That would be great. I mean, I don't see myself personally creating a revolution in the next sort of couple of months, but I do think it's something.
I can put you in touch with him and see if we can have a dialogue and, you know, how, what and where things could emerge ultimately.
Be good.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other allotment comments, suggestions, proposals? Andy, I think you were investigating the Fern Hills possibilities.
Yeah, and I think there's a broad interest there in theory, but I'd quite like to sit down and talk to you when you do the community allotment thing, because I think it should probably be linked together in terms of our community offer for allotments, because it's almost the a separate bit of the same kind of initiative. So I'd just like to, as we work up the offer, make this part of that so it's consistent, if that's okay.
I would very much welcome that. Thank you. I think it'd be quite interesting also to look at, what some other parishes have been doing with their allotments. From memory, I think Sarah had said at a council meeting that there's been a greater take-up of allotments during the COVID crisis. So we probably just need generally to review, where we are on allotments and what the possibilities are. Sarah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the community allotment and the use of Fern Hills have both been hampered, obviously, by COVID, and all the parties involved have had bigger issues to deal with, really. So I think it's just something to revisit at a later date.
Okay, well, we'll have a bit of a get-together when we can after people have had holidays. And thank you, Brian, for your offer.
Nick, I think David's trying to come in on that.
David?
I just want to say that, I mean, we have kept, when I was there, we did keep aside for allotments at Prince's Bridge when we were made aware of somebody who wanted to pursue the item of the community allotment. And I just wanted to say my personal view is I would like us to pursue this because I think there's an awful lot of value to the community here, not least of all maybe users of the food bank and so on. So I think it's a very worthwhile outcome if we are able to do this.
Those plots are being kept aside.
I know, I read that in the minutes.
David, I couldn't hear everything you said, but I think you were offering in your new co-opted status to be part of this initiative in some way.
Not physically digging.
Also gratefully accepted. Thank you. But I note the no digging.
Okay.
Anything more on allotments? I've been reading about what Petersfield and others have been up to with allotments. I feel we need to rise to that challenge. So this all sounds very positive. Moving on to trees. Anything on trees?
Just to report that all the tree works identified in the tree condition report from August last year have now been completed.
Excellent. Okay, let's move on to projects. We probably ought to do these one by one because they're different in kind. The Westliss play equipment, are we still awaiting the decision, or so that's what we've got to do?
Exactly. Yeah. Howard's trying to speak.
Howard?
On the last item, so I've been waving for a while, you missed out Liss Forest Recreation Ground. Do we need to have an agreement there? Because it says agree funding for first phase of works.
We've got that coming up under item 8, Howard.
Oh, okay.
Right. Okay. Roger, were you trying to come in?
No.
No, you just appeared in front of me, excitingly. So the pollinator scheme, where this is going to happen, is there anything, Sarah, we need to do about it? Do we need, for example, someone to be taking a lead on it from the committee?
Yes, the ball's in the court of the Hampshire Countryside team at the moment, who will be contacting us about workshops, but it would be useful to have a lead. I have a feeling that Ian James was interested previously, but it's a sort of area it might be useful to have a particular councillor leading on.
My wife is a very avid pollinator in our garden. I mean, not literally, doesn't land on flowers, but we have a lot of bees and butterflies, but I'm not an expert myself. Is anyone interested in leading on this subject? No. Everyone being bashful.
Perhaps when we hear more about the workshops, I can circulate the information and then members can reconsider if they are particularly interested.
You could, yes, you can make it sound not to be missed. But if you don't get anyone else, you can have me as a sort of vicarious pollinator.
I have a suggestion to make it interesting, Sarah. You could say, want to learn all about the birds and the bees, come to this seminar.
Thank you, Andy. We could try that. Okay, moving on to Mill Road Community Garden. This obviously is going to be a key project in the period ahead, something I'm not up to speed on. I think David and Lizzie have been working together on this. So David, is there anything you would like to say about this project?
Yeah, I guess just to remind people that this started off with an offer from the HDC to sponsor us doing it. We were unsuccessful in there, but we have made an application for 106 funds, and we've got just under £20,000 to spend for this project, which I think would get the lion's share of what we wanted to achieve. Lizzie and I have done some work. Lizzie's got a time plan, and I guess at some point it needs to be project managed because it's now our project. There's no one out there helping us, so we need to pull together all the component parts to make this actually turn into fruition. And I'd be happy to continue with the work I started with Lizzie to bring this to conclusion if that would meet with the chairman's favour.
As the new chair of the committee, I would be delighted to accept that unless someone else wishes to push in. But David, it would be brilliant if you would be willing to, given your vision and ability to get things done. I think it would be fantastic. Does anyone else want to comment about it or offer?
Nick, can I just come in on the where we are with the status of the land and EHCC? We basically are almost there, I think, on establishing what's going to happen and hopefully moving the land on so that we can do our project on it. But we do need to have a discussion about how we want that to happen in terms of, do we want to own the land or do we want East Hants to retain the land? But I got partway through drawing up some heads of terms for us to discuss on that, and then the HTC legal person went on holiday. So until he's back towards the end of August, there's not a lot more we can do. But once he's back, then I'll continue to push that forward.
Thank you.
Keith?
Yes, David?
Can I ask, back in December, we had 3 options around land ownership. Are those original 3 options still available to us?
They are indeed, yes.
So, okay, so it's up to council to evaluate the 3 options and come up with their preferred way forward on land ownership. But we need confirmation from the HDC that we can progress it against those 3 options.
Yes, yeah. And as I say, my understanding at the moment is that they are still there. And as I say, it's just drawing up some heads of terms basically so that we can then go forward from now on whichever option we want to go forward on.
Okay. And Sarah, I think under the conditions of the granting of 106 monies, there might well be a time scale. Do we need to go back to the HDC and saying the project has not yet started because we need to sort out this first initial milestone of land ownership before we can even commence the project? And I don't know how long it's going to take.
No, I can check, but I think we have quite a long time, quite a long period in which to start the work. I think it's something like 2 years or something. I need to double check, but we do have time.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, if I can just come back on that and say that, yeah, I have made the officer, the Section 106 officer aware of the legal issues. So it shouldn't be an issue, David. We should be okay.
I just wouldn't want to lose the money at this stage.
No, I fully agree.
Okay.
Sarah, I think we should accept your offer to check, but feel relatively reassured at the moment, unless you find it quicker. So Keith, when when the lawyer comes back and something emerges, maybe David, you and I and Sarah could get together and agree the way forward, or
fine. Yeah.
Okay. Can we move to the last one, which is CCTV? Anything we need to consider about this, Sarah, apart from the fact that there is a project ahead that we will have to deal with? Presumably, a proposal would come to facilities and then would need to go to the projects review group, would it, in terms of prioritizing it?
I think that's right. Basically, the project hasn't been worked up yet. It's something we do need to come back when we have a bit more time. But yes, I think that's right. The project would need to be worked up in this group and then put to project review for some kind of prioritization.
Do we have anyone who's enthusiastic about CCTV and knows something about it? Would like to do anything on it? Not me.
I think that is the point, Nick. In order to, can you hear me, Nick?
Yep.
All right. I wouldn't discuss it now, but we do need to take a view about how this is going to be led and who is actually going to work it up. I mean, it will involve officers, but it would help undoubtedly to have a member who was also leading on the work. So unless somebody actually volunteers this second, then I think the action that follows is to find somebody to actually take the lead on this.
Can I just make a point, Roger? Can you hear me?
Yes.
This came about 18 months ago, and one of the difficulties LPC was trying to overcome was to install the CCTV system that covered the new play area at Newman Collard, which then, courtesy of the football club, we were asked to expand to include the dugouts, led to the ideal venue for the equipment to be in, guess what? The groundsman's hut. Now, given the proposed change of ownership of the groundsman's hut, LPC may want to consider whether this particular item should now be a Newman Collard initiative, because it's their area that would be monitored and the equipment would be stored in the groundsman's hut. So my question is, does this still remain an LPC project? It's just a question.
Could I just respond on that, Chairman?
Sorry, I couldn't hear, Roger.
Could I respond on that, Chairman?
Please do, please. Yes, I was hoping you would.
Well, immediately I can see that David has a point. Having clarified the management of the Newman Collard playing field, although we, as custodian trustee, we retain the ownership, but the actual management of that land and anything on it is actually an issue for the trust. So it does perhaps rather change the way we approach this. It doesn't mean that the need for CCTV is any the less, but it does rather change the way who is responsible, who leads on it, and so on. So possibly it's something we need to include in a conversation with the trust.
Sounds good to me. Thank you, David, for prompting us in that direction. Any other comments about CCTV? I note that our chairman believes we should have a lead person. I'm just conjuring in my mind who would be best qualified, but haven't come up with an answer yet.
Well,
Technology is not something that in my civil service career, apart from being responsible for policy on the safety of nuclear power stations for a period of time with absolutely no expertise to support me in that, I'm not really qualified myself, but needs must. Let us leave the issue of lead unless somebody instantly volunteers. Okay, Sarah, thank you very much indeed for making that a lot easier than it might have been if we hadn't had your extremely helpful briefing note. Shall we then go on to Village Hall building maintenance, in which you have recommended a most urgent priority item in terms of the joinery, and said where the funding would come from, I think. Anything you want to add to that? I've got one particular question, which perhaps I could put now so that you can respond to it, which is reading the report. Section 8 mentions that, or suggests that there could be rot in the roof void and or the subfloor timbers, and assuming that they had good reason to think that that was at least a possibility, and knowing that rot spreads, I wonder whether that ought also to be one of our priorities.
I think you picked up a valid point, because the report does recommend some further investigations, and until those investigations are carried out, we don't know whether there's something else that's equally or even more pressing. I do have some notes on the further investigations if you want me to go through them. Now I can take you through each point, or just acknowledge the point that it's quite possible that further issues will need to be prioritised. And if we don't have the funds, we may need to look to reserves if they are that pressing. But the most pressing item in the report, as currently identified, is the external joinery. And I think it is important that we start to undertake the maintenance works in order to protect and preserve the village hall.
I'm a bit sensitive to it, as an uncle of mine many years ago had to knock down a third of his house because he got dry rot, which was a bit traumatic. And it is something, if they have good reason to think that it could be, there could be rot. It probably is wet rot, but it's worth, I think, us knowing as soon as possible. So perhaps we should have a look at how we can fund that further investigation.
I think you're suggesting that we undertake all the further investigations before deciding on the priority.
No, I'm suggesting we get ahead with the priority, but also do those investigations. That's what I'm suggesting.
Can I add emphasis to that point? Because, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Although there clearly is a need for further investigation, I would not wish that to hold up the priorities which have been identified so far. So as far as I'm concerned, we should still be supporting the recommendation that we go ahead with what has been positively identified, while noting the importance of further investigation.
Nick?
Precisely. David?
Having read the report, I think, to add to what Roger's just said, I think there's potentially an ongoing need here, because they talk about regular maintenance, stuff that needs to be done annually, biannually, or whatever. And I think it would be worth spending the time to come up with a calendarized approach to this that says, these are things we need to be doing on an annual basis, biannual, or whatever. And the cost of that needs to find its way into the budget as a requirement for maintenance on an ongoing basis, so that we can actually quantify the maintenance schedule. as opposed to, well, we haven't done that in the past.
Sounds like an excellent. I can't imagine how the previous chair of this committee allowed that state of affairs to have existed. But now that we've got this wise co-optee, I think we should get on and do that.
Just a suggestion.
So does anyone not agree that we should go ahead with the priority outlined in the paper? And does anyone not agree that we should do the further investigations subject to finding the funding to do the further investigation? I will take it as read that we will address the issue that David just raised of getting an annualized programme. I'm taking this as everyone agreeing.
Agreed.
Thank
Does
you.
that require the motion to be laid and seconded?
Does it? I'm not an expert on this committee's
If
processes.
in doubt, I would go with it.
Before we do that, can I just mention something under this item because it's kind of linked to it? I just wanted to update the committee that Claire and I have volunteered to take a joint lead in looking at wider village hall improvements in terms of upgrading it and renovating / restoring it to its former grandeur in the Victorian times. It's very early stages, but we've been in touch with South Downs National Parks. They've got a heritage officer to see if they can help us with our kind of consideration. So I just wanted to put it on the table for the committee under this item because it felt like the most appropriate one. Sorry for jumping in, but we're volunteering to lead on that. So
I think that's an exemplary jump in that you volunteered to do it. Is Claire doing it as a creative spirit or as a chair of finance?
A bit both. I like old buildings. It's across the road from me.
I think that's. I mean, I think it's very good that the chair of finance is involved, but I'm sure it won't stop you being creative about older buildings.
Chair, in order to move us on, can I move the recommendation?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favour? Anyone against? Thank you very much. Thank you, Sarah. Moving on to item 8. Could we just note that some of the financial information in the paper is should be regarded as exempt, so we shouldn't discuss figures. I think probably this is one where I should see whether anyone has any objection to what is proposed.
No.
So do we need to, this one, do we need to have a motion to accept the recommendation? I think we probably do. Who would like to propose it?
Can I just ask a question, Nick?
David, yes.
So you're asking the committee to vote on the £1,900 phase 1 proposal. Sarah, have we examined S106 or SIL money for this?
Did you say, do we have any section 106 available?
Have we examined that route?
Section 106 can't be used for repairing play equipment, only for new play equipment, is my understanding. Because we encountered this with works at the Riverside Walk before. So if you're replacing a whole item, you could go for section 106, but if you're sanding an item down, it wouldn't be, you couldn't apply for it for that purpose.
Okay.
So there is some section 106 there, but it can't be used for this purpose.
Okay, and obviously I'm not au fait with how much we have left in our own SIL fund at the moment. The council's SIL fund. Is there all been allocated?
It's the 5,000 in SIL from the last year's receipts was moved council last meeting of council to buildings maintenance in view of the inspection report.
Okay.
So there's no
Right.
further still available to members.
Okay. Thank you.
Someone prepared to
I'm
propose?
happy to move the recommendation for item 8.
I'll second it.
Chairman, I'm happy.
Anyone not in favour? Okay, we have consensus on that. Thank you. Finally, the pavilion. I think this is probably going to be the thing that keeps
Sorry,
us here
Nick.
till 10 o'clock this evening.
Nick, before we move on from item 8,
Yep.
can the final item on Sarah's note, there's a further £5,000 on play equipment and safety servicing. I believe, Sarah, this 5,000 is our match funding for our SIL submission for West Liss. And if we spend this and then we get the funding from SIL, we will be £5,000 short.
You're right. I've said it should be best allocated to that project, but actually it is already allocated to the West Liss project. You're right.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, David. So signage. Sarah, I guess you haven't given us options. You're asking us to endorse this design and the means of achieving it. Could I just ask you to say what our position is on the scouts? Just are they having separate signage?
They do now have their very own sign on the front of the pavilion, which went up last Friday. They purchased a scout sign and it was put up by our groundsman on Friday for them. So this sign is very much about identifying the location of the pavilion for those who aren't familiar with the village. It's not about indicating who uses it or anything more, it's just about the location. And members agreed before that they would quite like rustic signage, which can be found at Gretton Village Hall. So that's the road I explored.
And do we have funding cover for it?
Councillor Budden has kindly offered some funds from his district councillor budget, but we would need to find further £600. I'll probably need to speak to the RFO to establish where we should take that from, but it's possible it might have to come from reserves. I'm not entirely sure on that at the moment.
I'm glad we have the chair of finance with us.
What about the other district councillor and the county councillor? They have money.
I'm awaiting a response still on that front, which is why the recommendation says expenditure of up to 899, although we've already had 300 committed. But that's why it says up to 899 in case I can get further grant funding towards it.
Anyone have any concerns about this that they want to express?
Yes, Chairman.
Yes.
Can you see me?
Yep.
Can I speak?
Please.
I hesitate to speak on this. I realise that the design has already been a source of discussion at facilities. I have to say, I think the design is horrid and totally inappropriate. We have a pavilion which has, although traditional in its general form, it nevertheless has been done in a modern idiom. And I do think that if we have a sign, we need a sign which is appropriate for the form and look of that pavilion. I do not think a rustic design is suitable in the form that's done there. That seems to me incredibly old-fashioned. It doesn't relate to the nature of the pavilion. It is not the image I would like us to see projected. Having said all that, I wasn't there when the decision was made on the basic principle, so I'm not going to demand that we rework it, but I would say I dissent from the design which is being put forward here.
Can I speak?
Could you remind us whether we did make a decision?
My recollection is that Keith Budden rented out the pavilion and noted that some of his guests didn't know where it was. And I believe the original suggestion was to put a signpost up where the Bluebell Inn used to live on that junction. And somehow it's grown from a signpost to show you where the pavilion is into the rustic design outside the pavilion. And my personal view is, if you can get to a point and you can read that sign and you can't see the pavilion, you need help.
David, if I can come in on that, since yeah, you're quite right. It was people from outside the area attending our comedy night who pointed out the issue. The issue they pointed out was that at night, in particular, driving, they didn't have a problem with the idea of finding it at Station Road, because we'd sent that a map with them to show them that was the case. What they couldn't tell driving past at night was that building was the pavilion, because there isn't a sign saying, there isn't an illuminated sign saying pavilion. So though they saw that building there by the playing field, they didn't know whether that was a pavilion or not. And so several of them drove up and down the road several times before they decided it probably was that one, because that's where all the cars were outside. So that's a bit of the background. The only thing that occurs to me, Sarah, which I must admit hadn't occurred to me when you spoke to me first about the funding on this, was, are we going to need to get planning permission to put this sign there? And I don't, even though I'm on the planning committee, I honestly don't know the answer to that, but I'm just wondering if we will, because it's a freestanding sign.
I don't know is the honest answer. We'd need to explore that, but it would go on Liss Parish Council ground rather than on the pavement, which would be Hampshire Highway.
It's not the ground I'm thinking about. I think because it's roadside, I'm just wondering whether we will need planning permission or not. I don't know.
I think it very likely.
Sorry?
I think it very likely that you will.
It sounds like we need to revisit what's in front of us.
What I've heard, apart from the issue of planning permission, which is clearly important, is that firstly, our chairman doesn't think it is fitting. Secondly, the proposition originally from the people that Keith has mentioned was that it should be illuminated. And so I do think we probably need to go back to the drawing board on this one, Sarah. I'm sorry.
That's absolutely fine, but can I, just by way of indication, it is a sign that would identify people to where the pavilion is on Station Road. It's to the right location, but it might need planning, but you're not happy with the design. Okay.
Well, unless somebody would like to say that this is the best design and our chairman is wrong, I think probably not.
Howard's trying to come in.
Yeah, I think one word Keith mentioned was illuminated, and that means putting an electricity supply to it, because I think on a dark night people would have difficulty seeing it, and I don't know how easy it is to put have it illuminated there, or alternatively to put an illuminated notice on the pavilion itself, which would be lit every time people are coming to it.
As I think you're just illustrating even further that we need to go back to the drawing board.
We may have problems with an illuminated sign. The same reason we have a few issues with neighbours and the security lights. I think it wouldn't go down too well.
We might want to think about something very modern, I don't know, but I don't think we're going to resolve it in committee tonight. So I think Sarah and I better take this one away. Okay, so we will not have a motion on that one. And move on to the groundsman's hut. And who's going to speak about that? Roger, would you like to, as you've been leading the negotiations?
In a sense, there's not a lot to add to what was said at council last time. It is clear that there's some measure of agreement between the trust, the men's shed and ourselves as to what we all want to do there. And the men's shed are in the process of getting planning permission, and you've got a copy of the plan that goes with their application on that. What we have to do is turn this into some formal agreements. Probably the biggest agreement, it's actually between the trust and the men's shed as to what's required there. But we will ourselves need our own separate agreement with the trust, because our use of part of that hut should not be beholden on the men's shed. And also we may have different timescales here in terms of any agreement with the men's shed for their use, and an agreement for our use of part of those premises. And I think at a slightly lesser level, we just need to tie up with the men's shed some of the practicalities, if you like, about how the transfer will operate and so on. So I think there is a need probably for us to now go back to the trust again, and probably to the men's shed, and try and hammer out an actual wording for the agreement that will the agreements that will exist there. As I said, I don't think there's any problem over the principle of any of this, but of course, when you get down to detailed wording, you can always easily trip up over something. So I would certainly like us to meet again certainly with Dorothy Collard and any support she needs to actually work out exactly what agreement would look like, and probably the same with the men's shed. And of course, that will need to be brought back probably for the facilities committee to scrutinise in some detail before finally be signed off by the council as a whole. So we need to get on with that, I think, because the men's shed in particular is very keen to try and make progress in terms of getting the planning permission. But of course, until they've actually got the agreements in place with the trust and our agreement with the trust, you can't actually any of it go ahead.
Brian, would you like to offer a comment from your men's shed perspective?
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I can't really add anything more than what Roger's already stated, which is the status quo. And until that's been sort of travelled, there's nothing really to add. I mean, we are in the process of hoping to receive planning consent. The indication is that's likely in the early part of September. And we are in the process of compiling a work programme following that. Beyond that, there's not much I can really add.
But presumably from the shed, the men's shed point of view, you want a maximum certainty that this is all going to be sorted, although, you know, it is the trust that is, in a sense, giving you the go-ahead to begin the work. So I think probably what Roger's saying, we should get on with it, sounds right to me.
Make an offer, Chairman.
Sorry?
Roger?
Could Roger repeat what he said? I didn't catch that.
Could I make an offer to the meeting, Chairman? I would be very happy to work with David Dodds in A, having a go at drafting what we may need, and B, meeting with Dorothy Collard and Brian to see if we can all agree around a draft. Of course, the draft of something between the trust and the men's shed is exactly that. It's strictly not a draft for us, but given the nature of this process, you would expect us to be a party to agreeing those words on that. But I'd be very happy to work with David if he's happy to take this forward.
Yes, is my answer, definitely.
Thank you.
David?
Roger, I would like to accept your offer because, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, I am a supporter of the men's shed, and I think it's important that everyone feels that the parish council's interests are being properly reflected in the various agreements. So thank you for the offer. Does anyone, Howard, do you want to make a counter offer?
No, just a couple of points. On this diagram, a question first of all, to the left of the new shed, there's looks like a chessboard or a overgrown chessboard. What's that building there?
That's half standing by a trailer.
Building, Howard. It's a stand for the groundsman's trailer.
Oh, okay, fair enough. The other thing I was going to say, well, two things. Dorothy has drafted a license agreement between the trust and Men's Shed, but it's only at the draft stage at the moment. I only received it this evening, so I haven't read it as yet. But one of the things that I remember happening in the past was that we changed inside to put, I think, a WC and a wash basin in for the groundsman. And that seems no longer to exist. And I seem to remember when we did that, a strong case was put forward as it being a necessity to actually have that. Now, I know he can go outside and into the other one, assuming it's open. But I think that wasn't a good enough solution then. And I wonder if anybody's thought of that.
Well, if you look at the plan, Howard, you'll see that in actual fact it will be a new fully DDA compliant toilet, which is accessible both internally and externally. If you look at the plan to the bottom.
Yeah, okay. Yes.
Right.
So we are expecting the groundsman to walk through the LMS area to get to the toilet.
That's agreed, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Howard, can I just answer in a more general term? The proposal from Liss Men's Shed caters for the welfare facilities of our employer, our employee.
Yeah,
It's part of our criteria that our groundsman's requirements are taken account of within this proposal. And all of our requirements are expressed in this plan.
Okay, it just that it seemed a bit less than what was some years ago put as being important, but I've heard Brian's explanation and I'm happy with that.
Could I just then build on what Howard has asked? Just it was a question I was going to ask, which is, I am told by reliable men's shedders that the groundsman is very happy with all this, but do we as the parish council, have we involved in thinking about how these arrangements are going to work, and is he happy with what is proposed? I'm asking from the parish council point of view.
Yes, can I say that?
Sorry, do you want to speak?
Roger, you were starting.
Sorry?
Roger was starting.
Okay.
I was just going to say that the groundsman has been consulted and will continue to be consulted on this, and it is an essential part of what we're doing here, that the groundsman is comfortable with what is proposed, both for him or indeed any of his successors. Input is important for this.
Thank you. David?
Exactly the same as Roger. All I would say is the background to this is what we are looking at now is the end result of a consultation between myself and I as a parish councillor, our groundsman, and this reflects his stated requirements to me at the time. So yes, we've gone through a range of consultations with the groundsman, and I believe that all of his wishes are reflected in this plan that you see. That's my belief.
Thank you very much, both of you. So has anyone got anything that they want to raise before we accept Roger's offer to continue to lead the discussions and reach an agreement which meets the need of the parish council?
Yeah, Candy's trying to come in. Andy?
I was just going to ask Roger and Co-op Dodds if they would be willing to extend the remit of their consideration beyond the men's shed, because my reading of the documents that were circulated about Newman Collard and the nature of the parish council's relationship to it as custodian trustee means that I think there are some questions about our broader relationship with the trust in terms of the SLA and our role as custodian trustee and our involvement in the trust. So I wondered if that would be something that in due course Co-op Dodds and Councillor Hargreaves would consider and come back to us on with recommendations in on the way forward.
Can I respond to that? We are very aware that the change in status in terms of our position as custodian trustee does have implication, particularly for the SLA that we have with the trust, and that is something that will have to be addressed. I think we're fairly clear that we can treat the men's shed as a particular issue in its own right, and we will try and settle that, but we will have to return to the issue of the SLA, including payments being made by the trust to the council in due course. I'm very happy to work on that with David again, if he's happy on that. But again, that's something that will have to come to facilities and indeed to finance as well.
Thank you for that further offer. Any further
I would be
points?
happy to join Roger in that.
Thank you, David.
You stupid fool, David.
Now you tell me.
I don't think we need a motion on this one. We have an offer of speedy continuity from Roger with David's support, and I'm sure that's something that Brian will welcome. May we just move on to any other business? Any other business, anybody? Date of next meeting is slated for the 28th of September, which is not too far away, particularly when we think that Sarah in particular will be having a holiday and has a lot else on her plate. My suggestion is that we, as the next meeting after that is the 23rd of November, we keep that date in the diary, but only hold a meeting if there are issues that need to be discussed and agreed by the committee. Is that acceptable to members of the committee? Keep in diary, but not certain it will happen.
So what in November was that?
28th of September and the 23rd of November.
Yeah, okay. I'd already got them in. Yes, thank you.
In which case, that is what we shall do. And I think someone's just disappeared. I think all I can do is just thank you for your faith in me, in electing me, and say that hopefully by the next meeting I'll be better informed. But thank you all for your support and involvement this evening.
Thank you, Chair. Much better than the last shower, I'd say.
David, so says the policy maker.
Having heard that terrible comment, I need to say that I will be beating a path to David's door if he's willing to share his learning and knowledge with me.
I can write it on the back of a postage stamp if you like.
Okay, thank you all very much. I'm about to leave the meeting.
Good night.
Thanks.